Hello and welcome, welcome back to the show. So happy to be here with you all today. And we have a crucially important topic. So happy to be with all of you who are here in our live Zoom audience. We have a very special guest who is going to sort us out. All right. What are we getting sorted out about? We are talking today about intellectual property. We are talking about copyright laws. We are talking about all kinds of important, vitally I think I just muted there. We are talking about vitally important issues that we, as any of us who are writing books, publishing books, being thought leaders, being authors, need to know. And I have the incredible, brilliant, and fabulous Carrie Severson here today. And Carrie, correct me if I mispronounced your last name. We will fix it if I did. But we're so excited to have you to be talking about. We're going to be having this episode be required listening and viewing for all of our Thought Leader Academy members, our team, and all of you who are going to all of you watching this on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram when it's posted there, and through the podcast. We are so excited to have you here for this really important topic. So first of all, Carrie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about. I have been in the storytelling space for 30 years and I have a journalism background. So I've been in nonfiction storytelling for 30 years. And when I started writing books, I figured, it's my story. I have the right to tell it. If it happened to me, I can share it. And then I started publishing books, not only for myself, but I run a hybrid publishing house. And then I really started to understand copyright infringement and intellectual property. And so it's a very important topic. And it's one that we typically don't talk about until we've already created content and then have to go back and revise. So
Yes. Yes. Well, it's really important. And Carrie, I'm going to bring it up like this for you. And I'm going to, there we go. All right. And so we're thrilled that you're here. So all of you, just to know, Carrie is such a badass. She is a speaker, a paid speaker, a publisher, as she just shared, an author in your own right, Carrie, obviously, a writer of many books, and an all-around phenomenal human being. So it's just really exciting to have this. We've been wanting to have this conversation for a while. Why? Because many of us, like you, went into writing a book and we just kind of think it's my story. It happened to me. Everything's fair game. And the truth is that we all probably know a little bit about like slander and defamation type of terms. Like we're not, allowed to, go and talk about how awful American Airlines was if we don't want them to, be mad at us. And, especially in a Okay, so I want everyone to think about this in a book, right? This is published. It's not like a social post where you rant about something, right? This is a book that you are publishing, and books live beyond even our physical lives, right? That's what part of the reason we're writing them, because it's our legacy. So, Carrie, what I want to get into today is you have worked closely with intellectual property attorneys. Neither Carrie nor I are an attorney, right? I want everyone to be clear on that listening to this episode. We are not attorneys. We are both publishers, authors, thought leaders, speakers. And Carrie, you've worked closely and done many master classes and webinars with intellectual property attorneys. You've studied the white papers, and you're going to bring to us like the what we need to know now, right? The things we need to. And I'm going to share some things that, that I've learned along the way. But what we want all of you listening to this episode and watching it is to not have to, go back and have to at the final hour re-edit your work because you didn't realize that this was an issue about potential copyright infringement. So let's talk about just some of the main there's so much in this. We will likely need to have more episodes on it, but for today I want us all to walk away. I want everyone to walk away with, like, I was thinking about 5 things, 5 main things that we want to make sure as authors and thought leaders that we are addressing properly in our books. If we want to quote someone's work, how do we do that appropriately? Now, again, the caveat here is you all get to empower yourselves and speak with an intellectual property, attorney, for any questions that you have. But we're going to go over the fundamentals here because, Carrie, you've seen the good, bad, the ugly, of what, and we want to catch this stuff in the writing process and not something happen afterwards that you find out, oh my God, I wasn't, allowed to do that. All right. So I've got my kind of hot list. Carrie, where do you want to start? What's like the first thing we all want to be able to focus on today?
Well, the two really big ones are obviously copyright infringement and trademark. Those are uh, if you can avoid those two pitfalls, you're supporting yourself to the highest good of whatever it is you create. If you're able to avoid those two places, your work is typically protected and safe. And that's really, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, let's just be, so we're going to be, and those are our two bigger categories. We're going to talk about potential copyright infringement issues, and then we're going to talk about trademark, right?
yeah.
And things we want to make sure we are not in any potential danger of violating in a book that we write. So Carrie, let's go to a copyright infringement first.
Okay.
Okay.
So copyright, when your copyright laws really protect everything that you've created. So novels, essays, newspaper articles, blog posts, poetry, whatever, song lyrics, musical recordings, photographs, you put it online, that's copywritten. You don't have to go through a formal process of having a lawyer look at it and like send it in and a self-addressed stamped envelope. As soon as you create it and it's published, and nowadays social media, everything is considered published as soon as it's online, that is considered copyright protected. So when you're looking at creating, the minimum is just basic creative expression. When you're looking at books, and a lot of authors love to include other people's quotes, other people's written work, or other people's copyright, other copyright protected pieces, quotes from other books. If they've been on a TED Talk, I can't tell you the number of times I've seen Brene Brown's quotes in other people's work. Um, it gets a little mucky, and it has to do with the legit number of words you're using. And
Yeah.
so
Get real specific, because this is the granular piece that's so empowering for all of you listening. So are we allowed to reference something from Brene Brown's book, Daring Greatly? Yeah. But how many words, Carrie, should people be thinking about is the appropriate number to be able to reference from Brene's brilliant book, for example?
So everyone has a different opinion on this, depending on what the actual creative work is. So lyrics, it's usually like a stanza or two. For work, what I was told was 25 words or less. And so if you're legitimately just taking a quote from something, putting it in quotation marks and referencing her and where it came from, you should be okay. When you get into the weeds and the muckiness is when you're adding it's paragraph after paragraph. And I have seen this where it's sections of other people's material inside a chapter.
Right.
That is copyright infringement. You want to avoid that. So
Right.
the less of other people's material you use, the better, to be honest.
So let's all just be thinking about, if you're going to pick a sentence from someone's work, a poem. I've actually heard, Carrie, this is interesting. I heard no song lyrics of any kind ever, because Rebecca Makkai, who is a professor at Northwestern with me, also was nominated for a Pulitzer for her book, The Great Believers. This is someone who has been New York Times bestseller many times over. She and I have been, teaching things, speaking on things together at Northwestern and elsewhere. And she, in her first book, quoted one line from The Music Man, the musical, old musical. She quoted one line from one of the songs in the musical. And that estate of that, whoever owns the Music Man, I don't know if that was a Rodgers and Hammerstein or whoever it was, but tried to sue her. And this went through like Random House. This was like a major, big New York publisher, traditional, book deal, all that stuff. And they didn't even realize maybe. So what I just advise for everyone, I'm just telling you right now, what Rebecca drilled into me after that, the terror of that story, just do not quote song lyrics at all. Just don't do it. If you reference the name of a song, like, I Want to Hold Your Hand, the Beatles was playing in the background. I think I've been told that's the title of a song, and that's okay. Again, you can all check with an attorney. No lyrics. Just don't go there. Now, if it's poetry, if it's from an essay, if it's from a TED Talk, if it's from someone's book, aim for something like a sentence, 25 words, right? And this does include paraphrasing, Carissa. Yes, it's legit words or paraphrasing. What we cannot do is say, oh my gosh, in Marianne Williamson's book, Return to Love, when she teaches the 10 steps to finding fulfillment, and then put all the steps and a paraphrase of the whole methodology and an explanation, right, Carrie? Like this is where we do
Yeah,
not.
my skin crawls. So the number of times that I've had to tell this to authors, I agree with the lyrics. I've actually worked with authors. We've published material where one book particularly was about the song that was playing when her mother passed away. And it was a Christian song, and there was a lot of it. She really wanted to share the lyrics of this entire song, and it was very meaningful to the work. And so here it gets, again, it is a conversation between you as the author, the person who owns the creative content, and then the publisher. Because if the song and the lyrics, what have you, whatever piece you're using, if it doesn't move your story forward, honestly, it should be a litmus test where it's like, is this really relevant to the plot of the story or moving my piece forward? If it's not, it should be eliminated. But in this case, it was important to the author. And we had to, here's the next level of this conversation is whoever owns the copyright, it owns the license. And if you feel really this piece of copywritten protected material is necessary for my work, you should reach out to the person who owns it to say, hey, is it okay if I use this? This is what I'm considering. Again, if it's beyond just a sentence. And oftentimes people who own copyright, particularly musicians, will say no. And if they say yes, they'll be like, but for 10 grand, you can use it. So it is really interesting. Musicians do tend to ask for money. So going back to Sarah's point, I cringe when I see lyrics in books as well.
I just feel like it's not now we've had many people, our clients, in Thought Leader Academy want to use longer sections of copyrighted work, whether it's from
Yeah.
someone's book, whether it's a poem, and they've gone to, again, whether it's the artist themselves who owns the copyright, like Carrie's saying, sometimes it's the artist that owns it, but if they went through a record label and it's music, again, different thing, or it's an estate, like in this Music Man, situation. And so you can absolutely go. And we've had many clients go to the person and they've actually been ecstatic to be included. They've said, yes, I'd love you to feature my poem. I'd be honored to have you reference my methodology. They were a mentor of yours, and as long as they're credited and it's so it doesn't mean you can't use it. It's just you need to go to the person and get written permission. You'll want that in like a DocuSign, like an official legal document that says they've given you permission to use, or someone says you can license it from me for, like Carrie's saying, X amount of dollars. Then it's like commercials at the Super Bowl. If they want to use, I don't know, AC/DC's, whatever. I heard a lot of that Thunder song, they had to go to the band or the record label and pay the money to use the song in the commercial, right? And it's the same. So just being really just clear, if you're referencing with a full credit to the person, when Michelle Obama said this in her, X book, and it's a sentence or so, great. That should be just fine. If it's a longer framework, passage, quotation, anything like that, then you want to go to the person that owns that copyrighted material and you get written permission if you are going to use it.
Yeah. Copyright typically lasts 70 years past the death of the author. And so there's this free, what is it? I think it's actually called
Public domain. If it goes into, it goes into public domain somewhere between 70 and 100 years. And you can check, especially now with Google searches and you can check if something's in public domain. And so if it's older, much older, then that would be a different, if you're quoting Tolstoy or something, from the 1800s, that's a different situation than something that's more current. And Jade, if it's a chart, I would just always err on the side. You always get permission. If it's a photograph, you need permission. If it's a chart, we need permission. If it's unless it's a short paragraph. So I had a picture of a billboard in one of my books and I was like, who owns this? I don't know what company, like it was just like a part of the story. So I was reaching out on social, like who owns this billboard, to say, I took the picture on my phone, like I own the picture, but it was someone else's ad that I wanted to include, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. And again, it goes back to like I have a journalism degree, and I immediately started writing essays. I've been working in the public space, storytelling wise, for almost 30 years. And at no point even in media law, taking media law in college, at no point did anyone ever talk about this. It's crazy. So I learned all of this through intellectual property attorneys.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah.
and we have a question, from our audience of, what if the author has passed, but it's not in the public domain, then you just have to find out who owns it, like whoever inherited their intellectual property,
Yeah.
person
If it's published traditionally, the publisher will own it. Typically, they do have estates. And so it's not hard to kind of track that down, crazy enough. But do you know, are you able to find out who owns or who the publisher was of the particular book you want to reference? I would start there.
Yeah, if it was in a traditionally published book or any book through a publishing company, you can find the publisher would be able to tell you. And then if it's someone who, self-published or in some other way, then it would be their family's estate, like whoever inherited their intellectual property. So, okay, so Carrie, so we know what we're going to be mindful of in terms of potential copyright infringement. If it's longer than a sentence or so, we need to get permission or not use it. Now, people are going to ask questions, I'm sure, things like, well, like when Gabby Bernstein's referencing A Course in Miracles for her whole book, because Marianne Williamson did that. I mean, she wrote a whole book about her experience with the Course in Miracles. And then, both Marianne Williamson and Gabby Bernstein wrote books about their experience with the Course in Miracles. So my hunch is they probably reached out to whoever, owns the property of the Course in Miracles and just, hey, I mean, it was only good for that book. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure the Course in Miracles people were like, yes, please, like
I'm
have
sure
written.
Course in Miracles was published by Hay House, right?
I don't know who originally published that work, but then if that's even their same publisher, right? Then
Right.
there's publisher. So there's all kinds of, options and things that you
Yeah.
can, let's all be safe and take care of ourselves and think about these things so that we are respectful of everyone's, intellectual property. And a lot of times people will say things, I know, Carrie, to you and to me, but this work had a big influence and I kind of made my own version of it. And it's like, if you've made your completely own version of a system or whatever, then you write about your version, right? Or if you're referencing other works, again, you can reference them in a small quantity. Take a quote, reference a study, reference, some kind of statistic. Wonderful. The Gallup poll in 2012 said X, no problem. But if it's like publishing the whole Gallup study, then you got to go to Gallup and say, I'd like to include your study in the book.
Yep, I see Gallup referenced a lot. And just what's really fascinating, I love the publishing industry. I've been involved in it for a long time. Obviously, this is a really passionate subject matter for me, but when you're looking at publishing in general, there are a few companies who own all the companies. Penguin Random House is the biggest publisher. They're actually owned by a company in Germany. And Hay House was bought by Penguin Random House a long time ago. Course in Miracles was originally published by Penguin. And so when you're looking at all of this and you're going down, you can go down a rabbit hole and figure out how these things came to be. Gabby Bernstein was not originally published by Hay House, but I imagine when May Cause Miracles came onto the marketplace, it was, when you're talking about traditionally published books, these big houses take this stuff pretty seriously, and have departments of people looking for these things, copyright infringements. And there's actually a story and a lot of this a lot of when COVID happened and everything kind of shut down, and in-person events for authors and musicians shut down, a lot of copyright infringement and trademark and all this stuff, sort of cases started popping up. And I remember seeing a story of Jay-Z went after a children's book author for using his name in a title, From A to Jay-Z. And it's just, it's just best to stay on the side of better safe than sorry.
Well, and we now have options, right? If there's something longer or more extensive you want to use, you just go and find the person and see. And I've had, again, just my experience in terms of Thought Leader Academy members that we've had, I would say 99% of the cases, the permission has been granted by the people were reached out to. They were honored to be included and were very, thrilled to have their look. It's visibility for them. If it's a poem or a study or a methodology, they just want to be, credited properly in that work, which is great. And then you'll have a little thing that says with permission. This has been used with permission from the person's name or the company's or the publisher's name. So Carrie, let's talk a little bit about now trademarking. What do we need to know about trademark?
So trademark is even murkier than copyright infringement.
Yay! Isn't that what we all,
I
woo!
know, right? The general rule for what I was told on trademark is, so let's talk about, give you an example. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, both trademarked. Um, uh, General umbrella, soda. Again, if the purpose of using Coca-Cola does not move your book forward in any way, shape, or form, the proper term should be soda, because even though you're not referencing Coca-Cola in a bad way, or slandering their name in any means, it's really their choice on whether or not they want to be associated with your work. And so, rule of thumb on trademark, and most big brands are trademarked. Most big companies are trademarked. You can't trademark a generic term, but you can trademark a company. You can't trademark a title of a book that's copywritten, but finding what words are trademarked, what brands are trademarked is very easy on the United States government patent attorney, trademark off website. The rule of thumb is to avoid it by all costs. Because in the event they're not satisfied with your work, they don't want to be referenced to your work, they have 100%, it's totally within their right to send you a cease and desist, to ask you to take down your material. And trying to take a book off the market is actually harder than getting one on the market.
And so Heidi was asking in our audience a good question. What does move the book forward mean? So Heidi, that would be like, is it crucial to the scene that you're writing or the episode or the anecdote or the chapter that it was a Coke that someone was drinking versus a soda? So
Yeah.
like maybe it is in the sense that then the person ended up, getting a job at Coca-Cola and wanting to blah, blah, blah. Now, you know what I mean? Like, so it meaning is it essential is another way we could say that. Is it essential to name the brand name of a company? Is it like versus does it have to be Disney or could it be an amusement park? Now we all want to be, this is going to feel very counter to what we talk about as specificity in writing is always better. Instead of soda, you'd want to say Coke, right? It is better from a craft perspective, but we can do that with things that aren't trademarked, like the type of tree, the type of, like what, the type of bird that's flying overhead, like that bird isn't trademarked, but so we could say osprey instead of bird, but when it comes down to Disney or amusement park, you at this stage, what Carrie's findings are is that we'd want to say amusement park or theme park.
Some big companies love, like Disney is a great example. They love you using their term. Because they consider all exposure great exposure. But I know for Fitbit is a great example. They are really tight on their brand. They want to control their brand, and that's really what this comes down to. Whoever owns a trademark feels 100%. They want to control how they're using it and who's using it, and so. I've worked with two different intellectual property attorneys on this specifically. They both have very different backgrounds. One is an IP attorney for creative work. The other one is an IP attorney for a national nonprofit. And they both come back with the same reference or the same point of thought is it's best to avoid trademarks at all possible unless you have permission. So very similar to copyright material. My book, for example, I have a trademark word in there. Havening technique. It's a burnout recovery technique where I used it when I was coming out of burnout a couple of years ago. And it is a certificate, a license, it is trademarked. I reached out to them saying, this is how I want to use it. It's shown up 4 times in my work and they gave me permission and everything's fine. I have it in written. As long as I'm using the word TM after whenever I use havening technique, and I can't just say havening or haven, I have to say the havening technique, then it's fine. Finding out who owns a trademark is not hard. Just a little bit of research. And when you're when you're looking at trademarks specifically, it's, I would go to the direct company versus hiring an attorney to track this down. Like their intellectual property attorneys can get kind of costly. But it's not hard to find who owns it for you.
And big companies have legal departments. So my first book's a memoir, right? So true story, but of course I'm writing about, and when I was writing it, we had a conversation because a lot of it's very medical in my book. It's fertility, 7 years of fertility treatments. And so there were hospitals, doctors. You think these are the people who are really careful about how they want to be portrayed and all that. So we went to the legal department at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, who was where, where our son was delivered, and said, we're writing this book. Do the doctors want to be included with their specific names? Do you want to be referenced, or do we need to put this in a fictional hospital somewhere? You know what I mean? And their legal department read the manuscript, went through the whole thing, and then came back to me and said, yes, we've reviewed it. You can use our names. You can use the specific hospital name. We love this story. Great. But they'd reviewed the entire manuscript and then signed a legal document giving that permission. So it wasn't hard. I didn't have to hire an attorney at all. I just went directly to the legal department there. And yeah, Chris is okay. So this is going to be the question. What if there's, theories that have many different approaches, like, parts work, or so I think, we don't want to create fear in us as writers. I think that what we're speaking to here is, because Carrie and I have seen writers do this, where someone is referencing one person's book and saying, in so-and-so's book, this is the morning routine, that the person, teaches, and then wanted to like write a whole chapter on that other author's routine, and like very specifically from a specific book. I think when something has origins there's a lot of stuff in life that are evolutions and amalgamations and, and hybrids of lots of things. So I think the key is to reference, again, short quotes, and not just do long, huge, excerpts of things. Like, you can also get permission if it's a thing like parts work. Like in my new book coming out in April, we're including neurolinguistic programming sequences. Now, I've evolved and made them my own, but we do have permission through the co-author, because she was actually given licensure to be able to publish about the NLP sequences. So that was like that was the way that we made sure we were in integrity about being able to publish, because that was part of her mastery in that program, was you're allowed to publish even references to these sequences. So I think that things, I mean, Carrie, what's your thought on if something is like a derivative of many different things, and is like, if, and this would also depend on when it was originated. If it's over 70 years old, then it might be in public domain anyway.
Well, I mean, I do a lot on burnout recovery. It's not something so many people talk about burnout recovery, and for a variety of different ways. What I created, my workbook is called the Enoughness Method. That is something I actually did trademark. And then came up with my own sort of thing that supports me. In that book, I have 10 different techniques that I found were helpful. Breathing techniques, right? When you're looking at particularly coaching or thought leadership, a lot of what we're creating out to our clients have been things that we've seen and witnessed and researched. So as long as we're sharing methodologies that we've created, we're referencing where we learned them. We're not trying to take credit for other people's work. And that's really the big umbrella here, is that you're giving credit to where credit's due, and you're being mindful of some of these bigger pitfalls. I guess, Carissa, I would have to sort of learn a little bit more about where you are referencing internal family systems. Are you talking about like co-parenting, things like that, like bigger, broader?
Well, she's talking about like family constellation and different, like there's different modalities that have all evolved out of like, epigenetic, research, narcissism, and healing from abuse. First, I think because again, there are so many like everyone's building on each other's work, which is the good thing, right? And so I think just referencing, if you have your own methodology and you say, I was I got obsessed with parts work and internal family systems. And, you reference the influences, right? You reference your influences, but you're bringing forth, your own approach to it. If you wanted to use like, what's his name? I think it's Twyman who wrote that great, It Didn't Start With You. If there was something specific in family constellation that you wanted to publish, you would go to him or whoever, created that and ask, could I, could I like reference you? Of course, I'll credit you in the book. And could I do a longer piece here? Sometimes if you can't find the origin of something, you have to say, look, you could put that right in your book. I've searched for the origin of parts work. It seems to have come from this person and this, the founders of this, and here's the way I do it. Right.
I was interviewed once about one of my favorite breathing techniques, and at the time it was 4-7-8. And where I learned it was not where the woman who was interviewing me learned it. And so, these bigger concepts have been out here for generations. I feel like those types of things might be in the public domain and might be safe from copyright or trademark. Carissa, based on this reference point of referencing your own healing journey, particularly talking about narcissism and abuse, something that we haven't discussed, which is another kind of hotspot for authors, is making sure that you're staying away from slander and defamation. So when you're, and this is sort of how I started working with intellectual property attorneys and started researching what is safe for authors, particularly nonfiction authors, and what's not. Because again, if it's happened to you, it's your story, but it's not necessarily always safe to share certain aspects. And so you want to be very sure, very, very clear in some of these, particularly if you're talking about people who are still alive, that you're not painting a picture of slander or defamation, putting them in a space of defamation. So I'm not surprised. I was publishing a number of books in 2020 of other people who were recently divorced, who were writing books about their exes. And I was like pumping the brakes. And that's actually how this started, where I had to reach out to a girlfriend of mine who was a copyright attorney. And I'm like, what's the rule here? And so, yeah.
In that research, what I've been told many times, again, not being an attorney myself, but what I've been told is we have to change enough of the distinguishing characteristics of the person that they wouldn't be identifiable by a reader, not like your best friend who knows exactly who the ex-partner is, right? Like that's not what they're talking about, but things like, we can change, physical description, occupation, geography, age, like some of those type of factors, so that we get to stick with the emotional core of what happened, but that like an average reader wouldn't be able to like find that person on social media and be like, oh, you were the, you know what I mean? Like that type of thing. Carrie, is that what you heard from attorneys?
Yep, that they can't ever reference or legally say this book is about me and hindered my livelihood. I lost a job because of this, that kind of thing. So I published this one book called Shithouse in 2021, maybe. And her mom was in it, and it got pretty nasty. And so what our attorney at the time did was create a one sheet for her family to sign. And then, she was able to kind of get around it. And so there's ways. It's a longer conversation. I didn't want to derail the conversation, but I had a feeling when I saw that up there about narcissism and abuse, that that's a conversation that might need a little bit of additional time.
Krista, you just want to chat with an attorney, like as you're finishing the writing process, to just see if you've met with whatever they feel are the ways that it doesn't border into defamation or slander. That's not something we can answer because we aren't attorneys, but that's something it's not something you want to wait for the publisher to, because the publisher would just flag you to go talk to an attorney, like they aren't attorneys either. So we all have to just that's why when I was in the final stages, having written the manuscript and was in final revisions, went to the hospital and the doctors and said, do you want to review this? Because then I would still have time to make adjustments if they didn't want to be identified, as that particular hospital. Now, you could all say, yeah, but someone could have seen the story in the Chicago Tribune and figured out which hospital my son was. Yeah, but that's not in my book, right? If someone does that kind of sleuthing on their own, that's different, right? So I think you just want, if you're writing about someone in a way that's negative, which we sometimes need to do to tell our stories, we just want to make sure that we've, talked to someone and I know what those of you in Thought Leader Academy, we have names of, people, intellectual property attorneys that some of our members. I'm meeting with someone else on Thursday, see if she can come be a reference and come on and answer. So we could do a part two, with some more of these questions. But I think there was one other question, just I don't want to miss it, from Heidi. What if you reference a book without quotes, like you're saying? And Chip Conley mentioned in his book, Learning to Love Midlife, he says, yeah, again, same thing. If it's a sentence reference, like you're doing what doesn't work, then you wouldn't do this, Heidi. But I'm saying, what we've seen some authors do is then you put 7 pages of Chip's paraphrasing of Chip's methodology. No, that's where you just absolutely, we want to honor each other. Most books in the thought leadership space are referencing people, hundreds, I'll at least say, hundreds of references to other people's work and studies. That's very done, and it adds credibility to our work to be able to reference other people's published work. But we just don't, I could say, as Malcolm Gladwell says in The Tipping Point, it takes 10,000 hours to mastery. And I leave it there. I don't then go into like an abstract of Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point for 20 pages in the book, right? And that's what we're wanting to get across here. Most of you aren't doing that, but we have seen it. And then people get all the way to the publishing phase and have to go do revision. Like, let's just tackle it now as we writing phase is the goal here. Yeah.
Yep. And developmental editing in your, even before it gets to an editor, some of these things, this is the creative process. These are the bigger issues that as you may be considered a thought leader, but if you're writing a book, you're considered an author. And so you have to take into consideration some of the publishing rules and guidelines. And that's really what this conversation was, is, making sure that as you're creating, you're doing so in the best possible way to make sure that your work is protected.
Yeah. And I want to give everyone some hope here, because this can all sound like, oh, like crunchy and stretchy. And before we conclude, take some deep breaths, because think about all the books that have been written about abusive parents and alcoholic ex-partners. And I mean, there are ways to both write respectfully. We've talked a lot about that. Those of you that are in Thought Leader Academy, we talk about that all the time. How can we write with honor, with context, with respect, even when people have behaved in really traumatic and even criminal ways? What are the ways we can do that? And we just want to speak with attorneys so that if you are going to write about someone in a that had negative behavior, what you just want to support yourself and empower yourself around, like, what are the parameters to have that person not be identifiable, and to be, and there are ways. Look, many people have figured it out. Some people, like Carrie mentioned, actually go to family members and have them sign up. Most people who are writing about abuse do not have contact with those people and never want to have, and nor would be to have contact, in which case then you talk to an attorney about, like, what are the ways to portray this character, true person, so that we don't go across the line of defamation or slander. And there are ways, because all these books come out and people are able to do it.
Yeah, big topics. I know it can be daunting, but
I want to, those of you in the live audience with us, like, what is a takeaway that is empowering around this? Like, let's all just like celebrate something. Because again, sometimes these conversations can feel scary, be like, oh my gosh, we're talking about law. When I heard Rebecca Makkai share that thing about The Music Man, I felt like so nervous as a writer. I was like, oh my gosh, do I have to be, constantly, obsessing about what's in there? Just like, let's think about, again, broad strokes while you put your takeaways. Number one, if you're writing about someone in a way that is negative, you want to definitely empower yourself and speak with an attorney to find out how to do that safely to protect you in the telling of that. It doesn't mean don't do it. It just means let's find out, and that's a question solely for an attorney. If you are talking about a company and it's a big name company that's trademarked, then you either want to get permission or use a generic term for that particular thing instead of Levi's jeans, if you don't feel like contacting Levi's, and whatever.
Clothing company, if it's a food product, a breakfast morning food,
like your yoga clothes, your athleisure or your hoodie, instead of the Scuba Lulu hoodie. Now, we like that for specificity, but we can get the specificity in other ways. And if you are working on something, reference with a small, a small sentence or so of that person's work or that study, and then go on to your own thought leadership versus this big, huge chunk of someone else's work. Yeah.
I actually remembered something from my white paper that just popped into my mind that I want to share about the trademark and the big name brands. A lot of them don't let you use their name because they don't want to be associated with sponsorship. And there's something about their laws in terms of tax references and all that jazz. It goes beyond the concept of being associated with you as an author, and it has something to do with their bottom line and tax breaks around sponsorship. So it's a bigger thing. That did just pop into my head. I wanted to mention it. So don't take it personally.
Yes, yes, because you said like some people just want to be able to control their brand. It's not that they don't think you or your book is awesome, and other people want, they don't want to be seen as, product placement type of stuff that's in there.
Yes, has something to do with the Federal Trade Commission office.
Right, right. The FTC. Yeah, FTC. Okay. Well, Carrie, thank you for an illuminating conversation that we've been wanting to have. Really appreciate it. And I hope that all of us, everyone listening to this, and when you're watching, in the various places where this will be shared, that this is here to empower us so that we take care of ourselves as writers and get to tell the stories and bring forth the work that we're here to bring forth in a way that honors other people that have influenced us and also respects, and brands and their intellectual property the same way that you deserve. Because let's flip this around just to put the little, bow on the top. There may be somewhere down the road after your book comes out that someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I read your book. I love the way you do this. Could I include that in my book?" And you'll be the one being asked, and you'll probably really appreciate that they just didn't like slap a big chunk of your work in there without asking you first. So you're going to be on both sides of this. Carrie, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So much for being here. Hopefully we can do this again and continue as there's different new updates and more questions. So appreciate your time and your expertise and the hard-won wisdom that you've had after helping so many people, bring their work in the world and being a writer yourself.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Buddy, bye-bye.